Before we jump on into this video, I would like to give a little bit of a warning. I will be talking about some sensitive issues in this video, including suicidal ideation and actual suicide. So just be aware of that going into this video. So as many of you may or may not know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Now, as we're coming up on the end of the month, I thought it would be important for me to make a video addressing a few mental health issues as somebody who has always struggled with them. So what's up, everybody? My name's Taylor Dakota, and today I'm going to be telling you 5 things you should never say to somebody with depression. Psycom.net, who gets all their information from the DSM-5, which is essentially the big book of mental health, defines major depressive disorder, or as it's more commonly known, clinical depression, as a common and serious mood disorder with persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness, loss of interest in activities once previously enjoyed, and there can even be physical symptoms associated with the emotional symptoms, and those physical symptoms are chronic pain and digestive issues. In order to get a diagnosis of major depressive disorder or clinical depression, you have to have these symptoms consistently for 2 or more weeks. Now, unfortunately, those of us who suffer from major depressive disorder do tend to experience those symptoms for much longer than 2 weeks, until we are on proper medication and or in therapy to learn coping mechanisms. Not a lot of people know this, but I started getting the feeling that something wasn't quite right when I was in high school. But I didn't have anything to be depressed about. So I kind of just shook it off until after I graduated high school and things started getting progressively worse and worse. So I got into therapy, but that was mainly for generalized anxiety disorder and social anxiety. I actually wasn't diagnosed with major depressive disorder until September 2017, when I was 20 years old. That is when things took a turn for the worse. Now, at this point, I had been off of my medication for a while because I didn't think the medication I was given was very helpful. I had also stopped going to therapy because I didn't think that my therapist was meeting my needs. So fast forward back to September 2017, and on September 13th, I was admitted to the hospital for suicidal ideation. And it is there that I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. It was also there that I was finally put on proper medications that actually worked for me, and was directed to a therapist that was supposed to help me. We'll touch more on that later. But let's go ahead and jump right in. 5 things you should never say to somebody who is suffering from depression. Number 5 is, I get depressed sometimes too. There is a difference between feeling depressed and having depression. Everybody feels depressed sometimes. It's usually caused by something. It's triggered by something. A death in the family, super stressful time at work, being trapped in your house, grounded by the government. But the thing about having depression is you don't need a reason. Nothing in particular can trigger it. You just feel the way you do because of the chemicals in your head not doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. Now, when you feel depressed, you probably feel sad, maybe lethargic, tired a lot. But the thing about depression and being in a depressive episode is the sadness is next level. Because essentially, besides your mental illness, you don't actually have a reason to be sad. So a lot of the times, you're beating yourself up over that. But also accompanied with the sadness is hopelessness. The feeling and thought that it'll never get better. And it will. But that's how it feels. That everything's pointless. No matter what you do, nothing's ever going to change, and nothing's ever going to get better. Not only are thoughts like that on loop in your head, and sometimes even thoughts like nobody cares, nobody wants to hear about my issues, the world would be a better place if I wasn't here. Not true. But as previously mentioned, there are physical symptoms. 2 of those physical symptoms were chronic pain and digestive issues. People with depression a lot struggle with eating. Or every time they do eat, they throw it right back up. But the chronic pain, it's like a phantom pain almost. Because you can feel it radiating throughout every part of your body. But it's not coming from any particular place. It's not real physical pain, but it hurts. And it's coming from your core. Because you hurt. And every breath feels like you just ran a mile. Because it's so hard to take in. Actually, one of my favorite song lyrics of all time is from a Mayday Parade song. And the line is, "And the hardest part of living is just taking breaths to stay." Because sometimes when you're in a depressive episode, particularly a severe depressive episode, it feels like that. And so that's why there's a difference between feeling depressed and having depression. Number 4, somebody has it worse. This is said to be helpful. It's said to kind of put things in perspective. That no matter how bad you feel or how bad you think you may have it, there's somebody else in the world who has it worse. And while that's usually true, and it can be something helpful, and it can put things in perspective, when somebody's in a depressive episode, that's not a very good thing to say to them. Chances are, they've been telling that to themselves. Because that's what I did. Somebody has it worse. I have no right to feel the way that I'm feeling. And so saying that kind of just reinforces that train of thought. It's not helpful when somebody's in a depressive episode. They can't control how they're feeling. They can't just snap out of it. They can't just pull themselves out of it. Putting something in perspective doesn't help them feel better. Chances are it might help them feel worse, which I know is not what you want to do, especially if you're saying that. I know it's coming from a good place. It's just not very helpful. Number 3, what are you depressed about? Nothing. I don't need a reason. Depression comes from the brain chemicals in your head. The chemicals in your head, obviously they're brain chemicals, they're in your fucking brain. But so the chemicals in your head not doing their job. There are 4 chemicals associated with the feeling of happiness. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Now, a lot of these chemicals are enhanced by certain things going on in your life. But people who struggle with depression are lacking in serotonin. So they can't really control how they're feeling. because they're missing a very key element of healthy brain chemistry. And that's what medicine actually helps with, is increasing your levels of serotonin to give you more of a regular, balanced thing going on in your brain. So really, there's usually nothing to be depressed about. You just feel the way you do because your body's not doing its job properly. It's like any illness. You don't ask somebody with a cold, oh, what are you sick about? So don't ask somebody in a depressive episode, what are you depressed about? Their body's not working right. They need time to heal. They need time to get better. They need time to feel better. Number 2, it's all in your head. Well, no fucking duh, it's called a mental illness. But it's a popular misconception that if you change your outlook on life, if you change your perspective, you won't feel so bad anymore. But as we just went over, a person with depression has no control over how they're feeling because their brain chemicals aren't operating properly, because they have a serotonin deficiency going on. And so changing your outlook or your perspective isn't going to do anything. You know? Like, a lot of people don't go on medication, don't put chemicals in your body, just go for a walk, go outside. But you don't want to do that. That feels almost physically impossible. Because once again, something is lacking up here. You are physically short on very key chemicals to help you feel happiness. So yes, it is all in my head, because that's where my fucking brain is located. And the number one thing you should never say to somebody suffering from depression is, you don't look depressed. What the fuck does depression look like? Somebody please enlighten me. Because, and I said we touched on this earlier, when I got out of the hospital, they connected me with a therapist. And when we were talking about my diagnosis from the hospital, she was like, yeah, well, we need to figure out what's really going on with you, because you don't really look depressed. So we need to figure out why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. When I got out of that appointment, I sobbed in the car to my mom the whole way home. I felt invalidated. I had just the week prior gotten out of the hospital for no longer wanting to be on this earth. And this lady told me, I don't look depressed. I was wearing a dress. I love dresses. It's my favorite kind of clothing. I had some makeup on, probably just eyeliner and mascara, and I had my hair up in a ponytail. Sometimes when I'm feeling depressed, I like to dress up a little bit. It's if I can't feel good on the inside, at least I can look good on the outside, kind of thing. I'm also a stickler for good first impressions, and that's what I wanted to do with this lady. But my hair was in a ponytail because I hadn't washed it in a week. Because that's what happens when you're in a depressive episode. Who cares about hygiene? Who cares about anything at all, really? You don't. And you don't even have the motivation to simply take a shower. And so I wasn't going to go out of the house with my hair looking like I dumped a thing of grease on it. So I threw it up in a ponytail. Depression doesn't have a look. A lot of times we're used to having to hide it away, so we find ways to do that. Because you can't call out of work because you're in the midst of a depressive episode. You can barely call out of work if you're actually physically ill. And so we learn how to mask things. We learn how to make the world think we're okay even when we're not. And as somebody who has a degree in psychology, she should have known that. What does depression look like? I'll tell you. Nothing. It doesn't have a look. It doesn't discriminate. You can be rich or poor or any race, gender, sexuality, any of that stuff. You could be having what somebody would consider the ideal life and still feel like absolute garbage because of the chemicals in your brain. And that's all it comes down to. There is no look for depression. Because if there was, we'd just learn how to hide it. Because that's what we do. Before I end this video, I want to take a few minutes to talk to the person who might be watching this and is feeling that sense of hopelessness. It gets better. I am going on 2.5 years, it'll be 3 years in September, of getting out of the hospital, being on a good set of medicine. I have a great therapist now, because I said fuck that other lady. That's the only time I went to her. I found myself a good therapist, and I've been with her for almost 3 years now. But I want you to know that it does get better. You will not feel like this forever. And the people in your life do care about you. I actually, a little over a year ago, lost one of my very best friends to suicide. And when I say that your friends and family want you here, I mean it. You are not a burden to them. Life without you is going to be weird and hard. So if you can't hang on any longer for you, try and do it for them. Because it will get better. I promise. So as usual, thank you for watching. I hope you learned a few things, or you really identified with this video and were like, yes, bitch, tell them. But either way, I hope you give the video a like, and I hope you give me a subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Hang in there. It'll be okay.